Hello, welcome back to Algebra 1. Here we're going to go a step further and we're going to talk about simplifying fractions. Turns out every fraction problem you do, when you get the answer, you try to simplify it into the lowest representation that you can. So for instance, we'll just take an example. The fraction 4/8. Okay? What we do when we check to see if a fraction is fully simplified is we ask ourselves the following really important question. Can I divide the top number and the bottom number by something, and that will go an even number of times or a whole number of times into the top and the bottom? So let me rephrase that one more time. I can divide a fraction by anything I want, any number I want, as long as I do it to the top and the bottom. You can imagine this fraction line as almost like a seesaw or a balance, with a pivot in the middle, like you have some balance point here, and you have something over here like a block and something over here. You see, the fraction is kind of nice and balanced, right? So I can keep the same balance if I add a block over here as long as I add the same block to the other side. And that's kind of how fractions are. This fraction is 4/8. I can do whatever I want to it, divide it, or actually even I can multiply the top and bottom if I wanted to, by anything I want, as long as I do it to the top and the bottom, because then in that case it remains balanced. It represents the same thing. So in this case, 4 and 8, I know right away I can divide the top and bottom both by 4. So I can say I can divide the top by 4, and I can divide the bottom by 4. You see what I've done here? I've just taken the 8 and the 4, and I've divided the top by 4 and the bottom by 4. And so on the top, 4 divided by 4 is 1, and on the bottom, 8 divided by 4 is 2. So what we are saying here is that the fraction 4/8 represents exactly the same amount of stuff as the fraction 1/2. And when you think about it, that makes sense, because the fraction 1/2 is like half of a pie. I cut the pie in 2 pieces, I only take 1. That's half of a pie. Well, if I take a pie and cut it into 8 pieces, but I only take 4 of those pieces, then I still have half a pie. This is just a different way of writing half a pie, which is what simplification of fractions is all really about. So let's just continue taking some examples. What if we had the fraction 3/9? How could I simplify it? The first thing you need to ask yourself is, can I divide the top and bottom both by some common number, and it will go evenly? Well, I can see right away I can divide the top by 3 and the bottom by 3, because I know that 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 9 divided by 3 here in the bottom is 3. So the fraction 1/3 is exactly representing the same amount of stuff as the fraction 3/9. Now this is all stuff that you've learned a long time ago, so we're just doing a review. We're going to speed through it here and just kind of do a few more to give you a little bit more practice. What about the fraction, we'll go over here, 3/12? Can I divide the top and bottom by something? And yes, I can. I see right away I can divide the top by 3 and the bottom by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So the fraction 1/4 represents exactly the same amount as the fraction 3/12. All right, so let's go ahead. I'll draw a little line. I'll continue on down here. What if I have the fraction 6/20? 6/20. Now here you have some choices. I just need to ask myself, can I divide the top and bottom by any number that I want to, as long as it goes evenly into the top and bottom? Right away I see, okay, I can divide the top by 2. I can divide the bottom also by 2. That's going to definitely work. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 20 divided by 2 is 10. All right, and that's the final answer. So the fraction 3/10 represents exactly the same amount as 6/10. Now, in this next problem, you actually have a little bit of choice. Let's say you have 8/20. What can I divide the top and the bottom by in this fraction to make it simplified? Well, I see right away, I know I can divide the top by 2 and the bottom by 2. What is 8 divided by 2? That's 4. What is 20 divided by 2? That's 10. So I think I'm done. But then I look at this fraction. I say, wait a minute, this one's not fully simplified. I can actually simplify that one even further. 4/10, I can divide the top by 2, and I can again divide the bottom by 2 again. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now this fraction, I always ask myself, can I do this one any further? And I cannot. That's finished. So you see, sometimes if you divide by a number, like in this case we did it by 2, we end up with a fraction that we can simplify again. So you just keep doing this process until you finally get to the end where you can't do it anymore. Now, let me change a little bit here, and let's start over with this problem, 8/20. See, in the previous problem, we divided by 2 because that was the first thing that came to mind. But if you think about it, you can also divide both of these numbers by 4. 4 will also work. What is 8 divided by 4? That's 2. What is 20 divided by 4? That is 5. So, and I can't simplify that anymore. That's the answer. Notice I got the same answer either way. Here I divided by 2. I noticed, okay, I can simplify it again, do it by 2 again, and I get this answer. In this case, I happen to look at the problem on another day, and I say, oh, I can divide by 4. Well, I'm going to get the same answer either way. So when you're simplifying fractions, don't stress out if you don't immediately right away think of the best number or the biggest number that you can use. Just do what you know and just keep on going until you're done. All right? So now we want to talk about, so far we've been simplifying these regular types of fractions. We can also do the improper fractions in the same way. I don't want you to think that these improper fractions are really any different. For instance, 22 over 10, how would we simplify this guy? I'm not talking about converting it to a mixed number. I'm talking about how do we simplify it. Well, we can take the 22 over 10. I can divide the top by some number and the bottom by some number. What do you think was going to work? Well, right away I know I can divide by 2 because this number, 22, is divisible by 2. This number is divisible by 2. And 22 divided by 2 is 11, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. And I look at this, 11 fifths. There's nothing I can divide into the top and the bottom there, so that's fully simplified. So if you see an improper fraction, you just treat it the same way to simplify it as we've done for all of these other problems over here. And then our last problem is I'm going to show you how to handle these mixed numbers. Right? You handle them basically the same way. What if we have the number 3 and 3/6? How do we simplify that? Well, first of all, you have two parts here. You have 3 wholes, and then you have the fraction 3/6. So basically, when you're simplifying it, you just ignore the whole, or you can just kind of carry it through. So the way I do it is I write 3, and then the fraction 3/6, I kind of treat that one separately. I can divide the top by 3, I can divide the bottom by 3, and so big 3 comes along, and then what I end up having is 3 divided by 3 on the top, right here. That gives me a 1, and 6 divided by 3 on the bottom is going to give me 2. So I end up with 3 and 1/2, and that's the final answer. So the way that you simplify these fractions is very simple. You just divide the top and the bottom by the same number, as long as it will go evenly or divide in a whole number of times into the top and bottom. It's valid to use it. And then if you get an answer that you need to do a further simplify, you just do it again and again until you finally get down to the simplest form that you can't do that anymore. Right? You do the same exact technique for improper fractions and the same exact technique for the mixed number. You just focus on the fractional part. Make sure and carry this whole number through your problem. So 3.5 is the same as 3 and 3/6. So make sure you understand this. Follow me on to the next section. We'll talk about adding and subtracting fractions.